Welcome to the July meeting of the authority. We have today, rather unusually, in fact very unusually, a number of apologies from authority members, from Christine Watson, Graham James, Francis Flinter, Jason Casry and Jonathan Herring. In view of the relatively large number of apologies, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We've decided that a discussion on the proposals for legislative reform will be taken or be dealt with at a separate meeting, which will be an online meeting next Monday, 17th July. It will be a public meeting, so it will be open for observers, for members of the public to observe. It's just that is a very, very important discussion. And given that so many members can't make it today, we decided that we will defer that discussion to this Teams meeting on Monday. Tom's not here. I was just going to say, I was just looking, I was going to welcome, I still will welcome for the minutes, Tom Skrinar, who's our new finance director, who is joining us in place of Richard Sidey. He's not able to observe today, but will be coming to, well, you'll have a chance to meet him at the September meeting. And as always, welcome to everybody who has joined us online, including, I think, Steve Pugh from the department, our sponsor. As usual, the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be placed on the HFEA website if people want to listen to it. And we also have some external observers who are online. So before we kick off, declarations of interest, please. Start with Tim.
The other one, Tim.
I did push it.
That's it.
Tim Jarl, I'm PR in a licensed clinic.
Gita, I think.
I'm Gita Nagund, clinician and license holder in licensed clinic.
Thank you. Yeah, Catherine.
Does it need to go red?
The big.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Catherine Seddon. I've got 3 declarations. One is that I've been appointed to sit on the disciplinary committee of the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons. The second is that I've been made an Institute Director of the Chartered Insurance Institute. And the third, which is separate, is that as an Institute Director, I'm going to sit on the board of the Personal Finance Society.
Thank you. And Alison.
Hi, Alison McTavish. I'm the trustee of the Progress Educational Trust and the British Fertility Society.
Thank you. Okay, so firstly, as always, comments on the draft minutes of the last meeting, which was the 17th of May, and those were circulated some time ago. Are there any comments? Great. In that case, I will take those minutes as approved. To the extent there were any matters arising in those minutes, they've either been actioned or they're dealt with in today's meeting, so we don't need to discuss them separately. Coming now to the Chair and Chief Executive report, which you will have seen. So from my point of view, you'll seen what's written there, but also I'd just particularly like to mention our staff meeting, which happened last Monday, a couple of days ago. We have these meetings twice a year. It's a really nice event. It gives staff come together, and actually it's an opportunity for example, the inspectors who are either on the road or working from home to actually come into the office and meet with fellow colleagues, and particularly since other people now are work from home most or all of the time. It gives them a chance to come into the office. There are presentations during the day about what work has been done and given teams to report to each other, if you like. And then there's, lunch and then drinks afterwards, which was sort of quite well attended. So it was a really nice day. And one of the things that we talked about, which Peter and I are going to consider and come back to you with some recommendations, is how we can perhaps have more face time between staff and the board so that they feel very comfortable with what we do, maybe inviting that they can all come to meetings, but maybe join us for lunch or do other. We're thinking of what might be appropriate. But I think that that would be a good thing to take on probably for next year now, but to make sure that we have more face time with staff. Any questions on my report? Lovely, so I'm going to hand over to Peter.
Thanks, Julia. I'll take as read the items in the report, but I'd like to amplify a couple of things. Firstly, just to add my comments to Julia's in terms of the all-staff event earlier in the week. I think it was a really good event, and given hybrid working, I think these opportunities to bring staff together and kind of reflect more generally on the big things we're focused on are really valuable. Second thing to say is also, and again following up on Julia, yes, we have since Richard's departure as our Director of Finance for both, of course, the HFEA and the HTA, we have been searching for a new director, and I'm delighted to announce the appointment of Tom Skrinner. Tom will join us towards the end of August. We'll have a proper induction process, and I know he's very much looking forward to meeting you all and working with you. And I'd also like to put on my record at this point, actually, in Richard's absence and before Tom comes, that means additional work has fallen on Marunki, our Head of Finance, who is with us today. The timing couldn't have been worse in the sense this is the period up to the preparation of the annual report and accounts, and I would like to put on record in the minutes my huge thanks to the enormous work she's carried over the last few weeks. It's a very difficult time of the year, and she's done it with great professionalism. A couple of other things to reference. You'll see in my note about the Remuneration Committee, which took place on the 19th of June. You may well have seen in the media more generally, the government took a decision that all qualifying civil servants, and whether in core government departments or arm's length bodies of which we qualify, should be below the level of director, should be entitled to a £1,500 non-consolidated bonus, a one-off award, in recognition, I think, for as the Cabinet Office statement said, for the extraordinary efforts that people had made over the COVID period. We were obviously delighted in that, and I've talked to you before about the constraints that public sector pay has had on us, like other bits of the public sector. The sting in the tail was that the award was not centrally financed. In other words, all bodies had to find it ourselves. That Remuneration Committee meeting on the 19th of June unanimously agreed that we should make that award to staff. And I'm pleased to be able to report that it will be done so in the pay run at the end of this month. It does obviously create budgetary pressures, and when we get to the monthly report, I'll talk a little bit about how that and other costs are bearing down on our budget. But I'm very pleased to report that that particular sum of money will be going through to our staff at the end of the month. As to their annual pay award, we put a submission up today to the department, which is the usual way this works, seeking approval for that, and I hope to get confirmation of that as soon as possible. In any event, however long it takes, we pay from August, and it will be backdated. So even if it takes a long time, and sometimes it does, staff won't lose out. But that is separate to the one-off non-consolidated £1,500 before tax. The last thing I wanted to comment on is just the public bodies review. It says in there that I attended one of the challenge meetings. You'll know that the review has been ongoing for a number of months. Progress is... The original intention was the review would probably finish around about this time. That's really quite unlikely now. And I'm hopeful that the review will conclude sometime in the autumn, but I'll obviously keep you in touch. I hope that's helpful at this stage. Obviously, happy to take any questions.
Questions for Peter? No? Thanks, Peter, very much. Now, as we always do, we ask the committee chairs to report on meetings that have happened since the last authority meeting. So firstly, Licence Committee, Alison Marsden.
Thank you, Julia. I just wanted to firstly put on. I just wanted to put on record thanks to my Deputy Chair, Graham, who isn't here today, for the work that he's continuing to lead on some particularly complex Licence Committee items, which I'm not able to deal with. And also thanks to members who continue to take on high number of complex issues that the Licence Committee is having to deal with.
Okay. Now, Statute Approvals Committee, because Jonathan Herring at the last moment was not able to be there. Gudrun, are you going to... Or it may be there's nothing much to report, or just to say what...
Is it this way? I believe it's just one meeting, and we had, I think, 4 or 5 agenda items that were all straightforward. But the minutes haven't been approved finally yet.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Catherine, AGC.
Thank you, Julia. Firstly, internal audit gave us a rating of a moderate for the overall annual opinion, and that is definitely a good result. There were key themes for improvement around training, guidance and audit trails, all of which were accepted, and we'll be looking out for progress on those throughout the next year. We made significant progress with the closure of internal audit recommendations. Thank you to Marunki. And we discussed ways of ensuring even more efficient implementation of those recommendations in future. External audit hadn't quite concluded their audit, but we were confident that they'd be giving us an unqualified opinion. We reviewed and made small comments on the draft annual report, and again complimented Marunki on how well it reads. We did our usual detailed review of the Strategic Risk Register, whose changes reflect 3 things: likely reduction in GIA, the interregnum between the Directors of Finance, which Peter's just addressed, and the public body review resourcing. And we agreed a deep dive in October on the range of legal risks that we face and current existing mitigations. So if any member would like to attend to hear that deep dive, they're very welcome. Please just drop Debbie an email. We can give the authority assurance that PRISM will be fully functional for the purposes of opening the register by August, and also assurance on cybersecurity. Indeed, the DSPT has just been given a moderate rating, and it was also notable that it got the highest level of confidence in the self-assurance, so in the rationale for our self-assurance. So that is an absolutely excellent result, very significant progress on the position last year, and colleagues should take all credit for that. In the HR update, we looked at EDI plans and actions from the staff survey. And last but not least, we also registered AGC thanks to Richard, marking his departure, and very much to Debbie, and to our 2 independent members, Geoffrey Podger and Mark McLaughlin. And from October, we have our new independent member joining us. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Catherine. And thanks also for leading on a very good process. I was involved also in the interviews for the new external members, and it all went very, very smoothly.
Sorry, Julia, I don't think it's on.
It is?
According to the line.
Oh, it is according to light. You can't hear?
I'm sure it's working.
Yeah, it's yeah, you're right. It doesn't, all right, I'll talk into it louder. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't seem to be.
No.
Anyway, there were no meetings of SCAC, but there will be a meeting of SCAC before the next board meeting.
We'll swap it. Yeah.
Well, okay.
I think they're too late.
Right, so now we come on to the annual performance report for 22-23. As you know, we do this annually. We review progress against our KPIs at each board meeting, and the report provides us of an overview over the last 12 months, which provides a lot of good information on trends as much as anything, and gives us some very clear information going forward. So I'd like Shabir to provide an overview. We can then have a discussion, and we will then ask as an authority to note the report for this year up to March 2023.
Thank you, Julia. I don't propose to go through the whole report, but if I can give you some highlights.
Good idea. I mean, Shabir, I think you can assume we've read it, so absolutely.
So in terms of HR, one of the really positive things has been the turnover has steadily been going down throughout the year, which is a big difference from last year, when we obviously had considerably higher turnovers following COVID. So this is really good. We have got some additional leavers, Richard being prime one, in June. So it is going to have a little bit of an impact. But this is a very good performance. Sickness overall has been generally pretty good. The peaks have been through just spikes, through naturally coughs, colds, and so on. So there aren't any major issues within sickness overall. In terms of OTR, clearly there's a huge amount of focus within OTR and with upcoming law changes. We have 3 projects which are online at the same time, running for all of the law changes. One of the major ones is a systems update. So the team will be using a new OTR system, which should give significant benefits in terms of how efficient we work as a team to turn around OTRs, and that will hopefully be online within the next couple of months. As that goes online, we'll be able to test what the efficiencies are, and although the backlog has been steadily increasing over the course of the last year, we should start seeing an impact as soon as the new system goes in. Then we'll be able to see all of those efficiencies come through. Over the last few months, we've been receiving more OTR requests than we've been processing, and a lot of the effort from the OTR team has been on the new system to try and get it up and running, get all of the reports together, and a lot of the testing. So within the next couple of months, we should start seeing an improvement within OTR in terms of the turnaround. PQs and FOIs, we've generally been very good. There's no specific issues as such. However, the quantity of PQs is starting to increase again this year, with quite a few changes which are coming through. Licensing overall, the licensing teams, with some of the legal cases that we've been receiving recently, have been under a lot of pressure, but the turnaround in terms of turning around all of the minutes within that has been within KPIs all the way through. In terms of inspections, it's been relatively consistent most of the way through. We've had a few peaks in terms of the quantity of inspections, but they're more reorganizing how we're doing inspections to be able to match them with staffing arrangements. In terms of the overall inspections KPI, which is our 70 working day KPI, overall staff impact has had the biggest impact in terms of increasing the time to be able to turn around the inspections from the date of the inspection to finishing off the licensing minutes. So we have struggled to be able to hit that 70-day KPI throughout the period. However, there haven't been any clinics which have had their licenses affected because of the longer KPI, us missing those KPIs. There hasn't been a direct impact onto clinics themselves. The same sort of story happens with the 2 additional KPIs that we put in. Reports to the PR within the first 20 working days, and then reports to a committee within 55 working days. And with some of the changes that we've had within the licensing, within the inspections team, and also one of the new steps that the inspectors take, we are looking at changing this KPI to take that into account and give the inspectors more time in terms of breathing space to be able to turn some of these things around. However, it shouldn't have any impact in terms of the service that we offer to the clinics themselves. PGTM processing, we've appointed a dedicated scientific applications officer to manage PGTMs. That's worked out very well. It's become a much better organised system. It's working very, very efficiently, and we've seen the results throughout the whole of the year. In terms of finance, we've carried forward quite a lot of debt coming across from the last financial year, mainly due to estimated billing. That's had a consistent impact for us to be able to turn around a lot of the debts. So that's where the delays are coming through, and that's where the biggest focus from the finance team has been over the last few months to be able to turn this around quicker. In terms of telephone inquiries that we receive, it's been relatively consistent all the way throughout the year. However, one change that has happened is we've now publicised our phone number on our website. So we're getting considerably more telephone inquiries coming through. So that's putting an extra resource strain as well within that, in terms of answering and turning around a lot of these telephone queries. In terms of social media, we've had some really big levels of engagement on certain months, and that's the comms team's worked really hard to be able to turn around some of the big stories and get that level of engagement. And in terms of the followers, we've had a steady increase in the number of followers across all of our social media feeds throughout the whole of the year. Facebook was supposed to be the one which goes down the most in terms of followers. We haven't found that. It's just carried on about the same, and if in some cases increasing throughout the whole of the year. So it's relatively consistent throughout the year. And I think that's it in terms of the annual report.
Thanks, Shabir. Questions, comments, Catherine?
Yes, thanks, Shabir. I wanted to ask you something about the inspections on page 26. You mention increasing compliance concerns and whistleblowing allegations, and I just wondered, how does that compare with previous years, previous quarters?
We've certainly seen an increase in whistleblowing concerns to previous years, and which has resulted in having targeted inspections on units, so on clinics. So that obviously impacts on the number of inspections, and the chief inspector going with the inspector to the clinic. So the whistleblowing has certainly increased.
Thank you. Is it too early to identify whether that's indicative of an overall dropping levels of compliance, or whether it's indicative of more staff feeling empowered to raise concerns?
I think it's too early to say whether that's a drop in compliance. Very often the whistleblowing are regarding things that are maybe out of our control, more HR matters, but they still need investigating to check whether that is impacting on quality of care. We have had little cards made where the inspectors do leave around clinics to say if staff have concerns, they can come to us directly. So maybe it's an awareness issue as well, that they can come to us and have the confidence to do so.
Yeah, thank you. And presumably you'll be monitoring very closely any theme that you can draw from it. Yeah, thank you.
Geeta.
Thank you. Lots of good news there. In fact, thank you and well done. If I could just say well done on social media engagement, because that seems to be going really well on Twitter and Facebook, and lots of good messaging and swift messaging and educational messaging coming out. Just two questions. One on staff turnover, which seems to be really good news, that is going well as well. So do we have any idea from our HR department, is there anything that we're doing well? That's apart from, of course, the bonus is only going out now and the pay review hasn't happened yet, but there must be something that we are doing well. So is there any analysis that we can continue using that? The other bit, I noticed that in license fees, we have had nearly, 96,000 that is down from in the new financial year in the last 3 months or so. So are we worried about the trend, or does that include debtors?
Why don't I do, sorry.
2 months, yeah.
Can everybody hear me? No. Is your, that's brilliant, right. So on turnover, that's a really good challenge actually, Geeta, and the honest answer is, I think it's quite difficult to know exactly what the circumstances are. So turnover in part is about pay, it's partly about promotion opportunities, and partly it's about a natural cycle about how long staff have been in particular roles. And for many cases, one would say, without trying to sort of get rid of somebody, if they've done a job for a number of years, it probably is time to move on anyway. And I think some of the decline in turnover is that kind of process following its way through, in which particular cohorts of staff are now in place and stable, and that naturally reduces the turnover rate. And as Shabir said, in fact, there are 3 leavers soon, and given that it's such a small organisation, those numbers can bounce around quite a bit with fairly small shifts in staff numbers. My sense is that we put a lot of work into just generally trying to be as engaged as possible with staff. I think some of that helps. I think the better pay settlements help a little and so on. But I think it's really difficult to point to things we have done that have translated into a reduction in turnover. I wish it were that simple, actually. And I suspect it'll start to ebb up a bit. But what I'm really hopeful is that if we can sort of keep it at or around about the kind of 10 to 15% level, that's a very different management task than if we're north of 20%, say, which is very disruptive. But so it's a good challenge, and one that I think, from the HR team, we'll try and have a look at that. But I've seen nothing that I can pinpoint. And on the fees, are you talking about the first quarter of this year or the pattern of the previous year?
I think the data showed that we were down by 96K. It's the first quarter of this year, isn't it?
Cycles were down.
Cycles have been down. And so I was just wondering, are we worried about that trend, or is it too early to?
It's too early to tell. I was going to say this under the monthly performance report, but why don't I take it now anyway? So we just had a look literally the other day at the new Q1 figures. And what that is suggesting that we are likely to be over, if you extrapolate those figures through the next 9 months, the remaining 9 months of the year. So if activity levels stay as they are, if there is no significant gapping of posts because of turnover, most of our costs are employment costs, then we are overspent to the tune of about £400,000. Now, about 100,000 of that is due to the non-consolidated bonuses I talked of before, which of course, though welcome, was entirely unexpected and not part of our planning. So that leaves a sort of residual overspend of about 300,000. Now, what I was going to say to you is, I wanted to make that public to you all, and really we'll be talking over the summer about what steps, if any, we need to take, and I'll be coming back in September with a kind of sense of what I think this adds up to. Clearly, if treatment activity levels rise again, that will almost certainly, that can potentially swallow all of that gap in one go. It's not a good outcome, but typically, you've seen our turnover figures. It's very difficult when you lose staff to gain staff, to recruit new staff so quickly there is no gap. Depending on the mix of staff as they leave, obviously more junior staff, if you like, the salary gap is smaller, and so on. But you could see how it's entirely possible with the gap of £400,000 may simply disappear over the course of the next 9 months. The discussion for us in the senior management team is, are there mitigating steps we should be taking now? Should we be holding back on certain things? Should we be reprofiling in such a way? Because what we don't want to be in a position is having to take hurried decisions in Q4. So I think the key thing is, and I'll report in September, if you like, to what extent we've decided to take action now, to what extent we're just going to have a watching brief on certain things, and how much we are worried about overall. £400,000 in the context of a plus £7 million budget is not an enormous sum. In the past, we've had these kind of periodic overspends that have sorted themselves out. So I'm not unduly worried, but my commitment to all of you is it's not gone unnoticed, and we'll be actively managing it over the coming months, and I'll report back in September.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? So I just wanted to really just a minute that I think the inspectorate team have done a great job. They've been under huge pressure with lots of unexpected sickness, which has meant that those inspectors who are around have had to pick up quite a lot of extra work. There's been, as we've heard, additional complaints or issues arising, and they've managed to sort of keep up with their targets and so on, and under really quite difficult conditions. So I think it's worth sort of saying well done, and hopefully the next few months will be a little bit easier. So having looked at the annual report, we now do what we always do, which is our sort of monthly or bi-monthly performance report, and ask members of the exec to comment on various issues, starting with Peter, bearing in mind you've actually dealt with one or two things, but you start.
Thanks, Julia. Yes, so there are 4 red indicators as the report suggests. And again, I think we've touched on these already, but just to repeat, so the HR sickness figures, generally, as Shabir said, our sickness record is pretty good with the odd peaks and troughs. The increase in sickness, I think, is entirely explicable in terms of winter coughs and colds. And we do have 3 people on long-term sick, and that does impact on the figures quite significantly. But what I don't detect is any real sort of structural cause for concern over this. And were those 3 individuals not on long-term sick, the figures would automatically look very much better. We've talked about, and Rachel can pick up more generally, there are 2 reds around inspection reports and licensing, and you've already got a flavour of the extent to which there are real pressures there. And on the finance performance, I've talked a little bit about the position in terms of the overspend at the moment and the prospect around, but as I say, we'll be dealing with that over the summer. On debtor days, we have more work to do. This is a long tail of things that follow through from PRISM. So we had a period where, because clinics weren't submitting data to us, Normally what they do is, of course, they submit on an ongoing basis and we issue invoices on a monthly basis. Because there was a big gap, effectively, a number of clinics, quite understandably, given they were suddenly faced with quite large consolidated bills, took some time to sort of ask some questions around that for us. And so actually, we have struggled to get on top of sort of debt collection since that. The figures are improving, and we will, the other side of the annual report and accounts, be able to devote a bit more time and attention to it. So I hope that will change fairly soon. But what I do want to do is say a little bit about PRISM. Catherine has already said something about the last paper that went to AGC. Activity is now pretty stable. So as I've been reported to you before, we have all licensed clinics, bar 3, are now using PRISM, either directly or via their third-party patient record systems. And of the 3 outstanding ones, we have now finally begun discussions with them about the switchover process. And I'm hopeful that by the time we meet again, I will be able to report that all clinics are substantially, on the PRISM system. The overall error rate is 3.8%, which is much better than under the old system, which was anecdotally much nearer 10% or much. There's a bit of variation in that. The clinics that use PRISM themselves are in around about the 1% error rate. So if working with the other third-party suppliers, we can bring all of them down, we will start to get into that territory of error rates, which are effectively something which will make, all of it, we will know with confidence we are sitting on good quality, right first-time data. We are looking forward now to thinking about updating Choose a Fertility Clinic. I think I've said before that's this particular update will be the most protracted and difficult of all, because it is historic data that was submitted under the old system being validated through the new PRISM system, which adds a layer of complexity. And that process has already started in the sense that we have been feeding back in tranches data errors to clinics to get them to clear them up. That work is progressing pretty well. On the whole, clinics are now in a steady stream of doing data updates. And I think we reported to AGC we should be in a position by the other side of the summer to take a decision on a definitive date for when we can run this update of Choose a Fertility Clinic. That's long overdue. It's a key tool for patients. We're very conscious of that. It's one of our big strategic aims. But also, once we've done it for this one system, the subsequent update should be very much simpler. So we have the hardest task to go. And again, as Catherine noted, the other tail of the sort of PRISM work is the varying systems that now allow us to run OTR. Effectively, we had to build a tool that allows us to analyse the new register such that we can deal with new OTR requests. That built system will be handed to the OTR team around about the end of this month, first week of August. That gives them a sufficient period to get familiar with the system, such that when we get to the autumn and OTR starts in earnest, we will have a team with a new system, familiar with a new system. And as Shabir said, around about that kind of time, we'll be able to then come to you, I think, with a much more accurate sense of, how much administrative effort, if you like, it takes in order for us to process a typical inquiry. And that then will allow us to model, depending on the number of applications, how quickly we can deal with the backlog and all the rest of it. But there has been this particular issue about all of this. I hope that's a helpful introduction at this stage, but I'm obviously very happy to take any questions.
Questions for Peter at this stage, or why don't we move on and then see if there's anything at the end? So Claire is going to talk a bit about inspection scheduling and also OTR applications. Sorry, Rachel. I'm looking at Rachel.
Thank you. So following on from the annual report, it's still challenging within the compliance team due to staff turnover, recruitment, long-term sick and maternity leave. A decrease in inspector number means that each inspector holds more clinics in their portfolio, which not only it means an extra inspection, but it also means the support and answering queries in between inspections is also demanding on them. We have now scheduled the inspection schedule up to March 24, and inspectors are doing an increased amount of inspections. But we have managed to put some contingency measures in place which will hopefully improve things. We've got a couple of ex-inspectors who are now QAing the reports. QAing has to be done for every inspection report and is usually done by a senior. That's been taken away and gone to externals, so that does free up the seniors inspectors' time. We're also using them to do some of the DBA assessments, again, which will free up some of the time. And we're allocating use of experienced external inspections as well, and we've got them up to running with their own IT kits, so they will be able to do some inspections and support up to next March. So we are aware of the challenging circumstances, and we are reviewing, as Shabir said, the KPIs. One of the measures that we put in place when we launched the new compliance and enforcement policy was that we do a compliance and enforcement assessment after every inspection so that we can determine a risk score. This makes the process more robust and consistent across units because it's using the same tool to make decisions. So it is a very useful step of the process, but that was never built into the old KPI. So that's something that we're looking at now. So hopefully going forward with the contingency measures, with an extra allocation of the time for this process, we hopefully will be able to meet the KPIs, more frequently. But just to note, some inspections are more challenging, some require management reviews, several management reviews, liaising with legal teams, going back and forward to a PR. So it's not something that we would ever expect to meet 100% of the time because of this. Going on to the OTR, as Peter said, the PRISM tools are going to be ready later in the summer. As well as that, though, we do have the new case management system, the Microsoft Dynamics, which will stop individual spreadsheets being used. It will make the process more streamlined, and that's been developed over the last few months. It's been tested, and we're now going to enter the training phase, and we're hoping that switchover to this new system will be mid-August. So the team focused on the OTR applications in May and June because we will see a decrease in the number that are processed in the summer because of holiday and also this focused training. But the team are now trained up, they're working very well, and just for example in May they closed 90 OTR applications, which is practically double of what they've done before. So now they're trained, we've got the stability, the new systems in place in the summer, in the autumn we should be able to turn over a lot more and get a lot more closed and reduce the waiting list. But we'll update you that in the autumn. And then I know Catherine mentioned the DSPT, but a lot of work has been put into that over the year by Martin, Carl and Alice, and huge improvements have been seen. We do have an improvement plan which we will report back to the auditors in August, and we know where improvements are going to be needed, for example in our business continuity planning, and we will work in that to get further improvements later in the year.
Questions for Rachel? Oh, Alex.
I was just going to say, beyond the kind of DSPT, I think we've had great assurance at AGC on the work the IT team are doing, and especially around cyber, where the toolkit will never keep up with cyber risks, and so I think they've been prioritising the immediate rather than going. So there was some marginal gains, for example, about the way we all do the two-factor authentication, which have just come in. Which it will take time for the DSPT to catch up on that if it ever does. But they'd put that in quite quickly, and that's made our 2FA a lot safer. So just one example that we're focusing on the important rather than the audit, as it were.
Great, thank you. Rachel?
And following on from that, it is reported to AGC, but we do penetration testing on our system. We also have had a email filtering system that's been rolled out to prevent phishing emails and make our email system a lot secure as well. So the IT team are constantly implementing and improving on this.
Good to know. Claire, now over to you for Comms Matters.
Thanks, Julia. So just a few updates from me since the authority last met in May. Firstly, we published our fertility trends report on the 20th of June, which, as you all know, is our annual statistical update on treatments and outcomes. For a routine statistical report, we had well over 250 pieces of media coverage. All the major national outlets picked it up, broadcast, etc. So it just kind of goes to show how much significant media interest there is in our work. And there was particular interest in the increases in egg freezing cycles that have taken place over the last couple of years. Particular thanks to everyone in the research and intelligence team and the communications team for that publication. Moving on to slightly less media-friendly items, we are just in the process of finalising the Code of Practice update, which came to the authority in March. I should note for the minutes, actually, under your update, Julia, it's my fault it wasn't in your update, but that members should be informed that there's some minor changes that you have signed off since the Code of Practice came to the authority in March. And just to reassure members, this has not changed either the meaning or the policies that were agreed in March, but some minor textual changes that Julia has signed off on behalf of the authority.
Claire, just to mention that when I did that, I think a note did go to authority members.
Oh, okay.
So they did know, yeah.
Thank you. So the next stage for that is the final version with all the changes marked up is going to the Department of Health and Social Care for the Secretary of State sign-off, which we hope will take place over the summer for publication in autumn. More on that as soon as we have a date, and obviously we'll publicise the changes in the usual fashion through Clinic Focus and a chair's letter. On to other pieces of work within the Directorate. Obviously, as the performance reports show, the licensing team has been exceptionally busy but has managed to keep up to date with all the KPIs. So thanks to everyone in Paula's team and to Shabir's side for working so hard on risk and performance. We are in the final stages of delivering on various projects. Well, I say final, it depends on the authority discussion on law reform on Monday, but some very hard work trying to come up with the final proposals on law reform for authority discussion, the Code of Practice I've already mentioned, some more detailed work on the 3 separate OTR work streams, which we'll talk about in a minute, and the future publications which we're working on already. So next will be our annual State of the Sector report, which looks at compliance across the sector, which will come out in September, October. Following that will be our update on ethnic disparities in fertility treatment. And we're also working on the publication of the intelligence dashboards, which will be a user-friendly iteration of our data post-COVID, where the public and the media are used to being able to manipulate data by individual circumstance, if you like. We are trying to ensure our data is accessible in that way as well. So more on that later in the year. And lastly, I just wanted to mention the final steps that the Competition and Markets Authority are doing on their work in the fertility sector. Some members will remember, I think probably 3 years ago, the CMA started work looking at the adherence to consumer law of fertility clinics. We had a kind of supportive relationship. We were very supportive of their work. This is an area we have no regulatory power, but it is their statutory responsibilities rather than our regime. The final part of their work is a piece of work that they think will be very useful for patients, but it's taken a while to get together. So this is from their work with patients, or in their words, consumers. They looked at how patients are choosing clinics and how they are able or not able to compare between clinics based on price. And they found, both from their own research and from the in-depth patient consumer research they did, that it was very difficult for patients to compare one clinic to another because of the way treatments are described and prices or cost are outlined. They came up with a proposal for what they called a standardised price, so that every clinic would display a kind of what a standard IVF cycle would look like. They had a series of roundtables. There was really great engagement from across both NHS and private clinics, but no real agreement on what a standard cycle would look like. The CMA have then come back and said, well, how about having an average price instead? So in any 1 year, a clinic would publish the average price of, or average cost of 3 or 4 standard types of treatment. And again, that is going back to the sector. There's some roundtables currently with, again, really good attendance, both in person and online. And I think lots of discussion from clinics who very much agree this would be helpful for patients, but I'm not sure how far they're agreeing on what that price or cost should look like. So we are going along between Rachel and I as observers to those roundtables. Obviously, this is, we think, one or both of those types of prices would be helpful for patients, but we don't have any statutory responsibility over which it is. And I think importantly, this would be voluntary for clinics to sign up. The CMA are not going to stay in this sector long term. That's not where their regulatory role would be, and obviously we have no regulatory powers over this, so this would be important transparent data for patients, but whether it happens and how it happens is sort of beyond our remit. But I thought it was just worth noting that that's the end stage of the Competition and Markets Authority. Sorry, just to have one thing, should I pause?
No.
Sorry, I failed to read my notes. I just want to mention treatment add-ons because that has been coming back and forth to the authority for a number of years. In the final stages of the Scientific and Clinical Advisory Committee, which Tim Child chairs, is going to meet in a couple of weeks' time to review the add-ons that are currently on our website according to that new 5 rating system. So we hope after that, if there's agreement on some or all of the add-ons, we'll be able to publish those new rating systems and publicise them later in the summer. And assuming that goes ahead, we will come back to the authority in either September or November to kind of round up that particular piece of work, which was on improving the add-ons rating system.
Thank you, Claire. So comments, questions for Claire? I just wanted to say that firstly, that it's been an excellent relationship with the CMA, and we're grateful for their support. But I think it was always going to be a sort of temporary relationship, and I think it just highlights the necessity, which we are going to be talking about in our proposals, for us to have our own powers and really be able to operate on our own. We're grateful for other organisations to support us, but it'd be much more sensible, really, and probably more effective for us to have our own powers, and this just underlines it, I think. Okay. Thanks. There is a break now, but I think that... Alison.
Thanks, Julia. I just want to say I was really interested in the work you described with the CMA about the average price, to the extent that the HFEA can influence what the CMA does, and bearing in mind that it would be a voluntary arrangement with clinics. I just wanted to say I think it would have maximum benefit provided it's contextual, any average price is contextualised for patients, because as a patient, and particularly as a first-time patient, you have absolutely no idea how many of those average treatments you might end up needing to have. So I would really hate for that initiative to end up having very limited benefit for patients.
Thank you. There is a break scheduled, but I think we're doing fine and it's still early, so if everybody is fine with that, we'll crack on. Yeah? Seeing nods around the table. So now, this is an item for decision on strategy. You will recall at the May meeting, we agreed that we would extend our current strategy for another year, so 24 to 25, and then we would look at another 3-year strategy. And that's partly because there's quite a few uncertainties about with the work that we're doing at the moment, legislative reform, OTR and so on, and how they're going to turn out. And also, given the pressures that everybody's under at the moment and the amount of work that is ongoing, it just makes sense to do that and carry on for another year. However, we still need to discuss the key activities and our priorities for the year 2024 to 2025. And what I'd like to do is ask Paula to outline those key activities now for us, and then we can really comment on her proposals, and that will also look at priorities and hopefully agree a set of proposals going forward that will take us through to 2025. So Paula, all yours.
Thank you very much, Julia. The report itself is pretty self-explanatory, but this is really helpful timing because it's at this time of year, in August in fact, that we always kick off the business planning round, and we have a big workshop with CMG each year to kickstart the business planning for the next year. So it's useful to have this conversation now so that we're feeding in the right things to our conversations about the business plan. What we do at that meeting is we look ahead, we do a bit of prioritising, we take stock of how it's going in the year so far and have a think about what things from this year are likely to continue into the next. And then following on from that, in either September or November, we bring you a paper laying out what we think should go in the next business plan so that you can guide the development of it a bit. And then we proceed with the rest of the drafting and the getting it to the department and everything. And I'm sure that towards the end of this calendar year will also fit quite well for us to pick up our discussions about the next strategy too, because it'll feel like we know a bit more by then. So I think the timing of this is going to work really well. So for now, this paper includes a list of the things that we could do next year or could do more of next year that would still be in line with the current strategy and would help us to deliver more of that since we've decided to extend it. So in summary, that would include more ongoing monitoring of fertility trends, developing our position on the use of HFEA information and data, possibly leading to some website updates and improvements, some work on the women's health strategy, particularly where we can perhaps gain more traction when it comes to primary care information, which was one of the big aims that we wanted to achieve in the strategy. Some more work on regulatory transparency, which we anticipate starting work on towards the end of the current business plan. Keeping up all our monitoring of AI and genetics developments through SCAC and considering our responses whenever there are new developments. Following on from all the major projects this year on OTR, we'll of course then want to monitor what the revised service and demand looks like and think about future needs. So we'll also be implementing the new support service arrangements, which will follow on from you considering proposals on that later in this year. So there'll be quite a lot still to do in the next year, I think, on OTR. There will obviously be more to do on modernising the Act. We don't yet know how that work will land, so we'll have to consider that at a later stage. And of course, we know we'll have some recommendations to implement following the Public Bodies Review this year. So really, your thoughts on any of that and whether that seems sensible for including in next year's business plan? Thoughts on any of that are welcome, and we can then convey those into the CMG business planning meeting in August. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Paula. So, Geeta to start.
Thank you, Paula. The vision, as always, is great about shaping the future of fertility care and treatment. I just wondered if it would be possible to include in 2.3 about the right information, and you've quite rightly included the work, whether how much is being done, I don't know at the moment on women's health strategy, but could we include also, particularly with regard to primary healthcare information and ethnic disparities, only because it's also addressed in women's health strategy as one of the chapters, and there's a lot of good work that's going on within the HFEA, and to build on that work, and my intention is that we don't make it peripheral or a fringe activity, but bring that into the main strategy so that it's not like it's not going to get time. It will be addressed as part of the strategy. It's just a request, I suppose, if it is possible to do that.
Do you think, Geeta, what would you think about if we made that kind of a wider sentence on health inequalities, or do you think it should be particularly inequalities in relation to ethnicity?
Personally, I would prefer wider health inequalities because it would also fit in with the strategic objectives, the wider strategic objectives that's going on. Yeah.
Just to echo Geeta, I'm entirely in agreement. Interesting that you picked it out under the theme of right information. I actually wondered whether it is best incorporated into the question, the strategic objective of best care, because it seems to me that what we've always had in mind is best care for all, and therein lies the obligation both to gather data on inequalities for whatever reason, but also to begin to think, possibly not for next year, but possibly for our future strategy, the question of to what degree we can use and act and meaningfully input into progress to mitigate those inequalities, and how we should do it. But yeah, I'd very much like to see the beginnings of that and the data beginnings of that in next year's business plan.
May I just respond? Yes, Catherine, I agree with that because the work is already started anyway, and it also gives the platform, a proper platform about addressing for all. And of course, we could go beyond that. Even the government's women's health strategy mentions about an intersectional approach as well. But I think if we could do that in our strategy document, it would be quite good for us to continue that work, I think.
Thank you. The other point that I wanted to just raise is under the heading regulatory transparency under the right information, I would welcome further thoughts around what we mean by regulatory transparency, because clearly there are a number of different options. One is more overt transparency and not just our inspection reports, but also the way we go about decision making in a number of different aspects of our work. The second is potentially using that information, not just in a CAFC way, but using that information in effect to provide some kind of rankings or kite markings for consumers. And the third, which is perhaps more radical, and again, something that may be for the next strategy rather than next year, is thinking about impact metrics, so thematic changes over time, either directly as a result of our interventions or for reasons of market development. And that could cover a whole host of things, ranging from website use, successful legal challenge, patient satisfaction with regard to information, partner single satisfaction, a whole range of data that we do know about and that regularly comes to us, but we haven't historically put it together in terms of impact metrics, and it may be that that's something that we want to consider.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's just a very small point. I obviously welcome the point about developing the position on use of HFEA information with the rise of online providers. I know you've said potentially, but I would possibly take out the kind of leading to a future website update, because I think one of the big strategic questions we all want to consider is to what extent do we want people to come to us to get that information, or to what extent do we want to make sure that information is wherever people are going or organically. So I appreciate you might leave it in because we'll need budget for a website upload and all that, but I think that's the strategic question that we'll need to answer.
That's really helpful, Alex, because what I was going to say was, I think, and maybe this is for our next 3-year strategy, but now, PRISM is pretty much bedded in, and we've done some very good work on the IT side, looking at use of our data generally. We've discussed this before, and how we make it available, under what circumstances we make it available, and so on. It's a big topic, and although I wouldn't say it's something we're going to prioritise for next year, because I don't think we'll have the bandwidth. I think we do need to be thinking about it and really just not parking that issue during this next year, so that we can incorporate it into our next 3-year strategy. But I think we do have to start doing the thinking as we go next year, if that makes sense, Paula. Okay, so if there are no more questions, comments, then basically we need to approve the proposals that Paula set out. I think it's 2.3 of item 7 in your papers on these the proposed work for 2024-25. Yeah, is everybody happy with that? Yeah, lots of nods. Okay. Thanks very much, Paula. Off you go. You've got what you need, I think. And thank you also very much, by the way, to Paula and the team for getting this organised, because it's meant a little bit of a pivot and a different way of thinking. And I think it's we've come to a very good decision on how the next 4 years is how we're going to work over the next 4 years. OTR update. Claire and Rachel, I think, are doing this together.
I think this is quite a brief update. So we committed to updating at every authority meeting on what's happening with the 3 separate work streams that are delivering all the different changes, both to the service, the OTR service itself, the support service, and the wider communications in this crucial year. So this is the next update. I was going to say, I can't remember, the 3rd or the 4th update. Just a reminder that 3 separate work streams. One is looking at the service, particularly the kind of IT infrastructure and staffing level, to ensure that we can meet any potential, existing and future demand for opening the register requests. We're looking at the future of if you could go back one slide, looking at the future of the support service, where we will come back to authority later in the year to look at what that looks like. And lastly, we have a wider communications stream to update our communications and ensure we have relevant and timely information throughout the year and beyond. So if I hand on to you, Rachel, for the next slide. Thanks, Paul.
So I've already updated on some of these issues here, but we are having good progress on the new IT system, the case management system. We've seen it being demoed, staff have done the testing, we're at training phase. There are some further improvements to be made, but we're hoping by the end of August to be switched over to that new system, which will really streamline the process. We're continuing to work on updating policies, gain legal advice, develop the handbook further. So, for example, the decision that authority made, the method of using donor addresses to contact donors has now been built into the protocols and the procedures in that handbook. And as Peter talked about earlier, the RETA tools, the register tools to extract data, will also be handed over to the OTR team by the end of the summer, which will help them again, get the data more quickly and more efficiently rather than using manual workarounds to extract data. So that will be a huge improvement for them. And then if we just move on to look at the support service, this has been quite an active work stream over the last few months. A detailed literature review has been done to compare support systems, how support is offered in various countries, which we've discussed and looked at the different models, and different meetings have been set up, for example, with VARTA to understand about how they deliver a service. We did 2 expert roundtable discussions, which were incredibly useful. We gained a lot of insight from those, really useful intelligence that we got from them. The key message was that there are lots of different ways to provide support, and one counselling session might not be the right type of support that an 18-year-old might use. And we learned a lot more about peer-to-peer support, how DCR would see the service of support provision
develop in the future. Whilst there was a recognition that that might not be the HFEA's responsibility to do that and to look wider than just a counselling service, one of the key messages was that there's a strong need for signposting to credible, high quality information, and that HFEA could have a role in that in the future and helping clinics ensure that they're signposting to the right information for donor conceived individuals. We're currently developing a questionnaire which goes out to those affected by donor conception to gather information about what type of support that they would consider, what they would find useful, whether they would be prepared to pay an application fee or pay for support, and what type of level of that payment would be. That's undergoing user testing at the moment, and we're due to launch that by the end of July, and that will again give us some useful information about those who actually would access a service, what they would deem would be useful for themselves.
And just lastly, looking at the communications work stream, so we're really in the final stages of planning for the kind of big launches that will take place in September. So we did some targeted communications relating to donor conception awareness week or day last, which was a few months ago, where we kind of tested the waters to see what the traction was from mainstream media and social media on publicising for donors the need that they may be moving to be identifiable, if that makes sense, and that to update their contact details with clinics or with ourselves. And we saw that there was a great deal of interest in that. So there will be further public-facing communications activity from September targeted at donors and donor-conceived individuals and their families to publicise the service. We are revamping all the website information relating to donation or accessing donation. We've got a lot of work going on with stakeholders, both our formal professional and patient organisation stakeholder groups and other more informal influencers or individuals who are doing lots of work for themselves on publicising information about donor conception. And we'll be doing some more work with them on social media, including video content, which I know that authority members are very keen on. And we'll obviously be doing a lot of clinic communication, both via updating pages on the clinic portal and updates through Clinic Focus. The last slide just goes over the ongoing risks from this work. I don't think there is any new information to add to that, but just to reiterate that those risks are ongoing.
Thanks, Claire. Any questions, comments on the update? Catherine?
Yes, thanks, both. Really good. I had one question about the questionnaire. It may be too late, but would it be helpful to circulate that in draft to authority members to see whether we've got any suggestions for anything that either might be ambiguous or anything that may be in there, that should be in there that isn't? And relatedly, are you intending to send it out to donor-conceived individuals, but also those who have been donors in the past, to essentially say, if you were in the same situation now, what sort of support service would you be considering it, or are you sending it to a rather different cohort?
I mean, it's...
Sorry.
It's... we're in the sending it out for user testing at the moment. What we've asked to start with is DCN and Beaker counsellors to look at the text of it to ensure that they feel that there's nothing sensitive or offensive in there, that a DCN have looked at the type of questions as well. So if anybody would like to have a look at it, that's certainly something we can do. It will be going out through different social media channels to like DCN and for, other, so it's not going to be specifically sent to individuals, but we're hoping that it will be picked up like that with clinics having it, so for donors or past donors and websites. So we're hoping that it will be picked up like that with a wide range of people.
No, thank you. Thank you. And the only other area that I wondered whether it would be helpful just to outline to the authority, I know that you already got it covered at Programme Assurance Board, but I just wondered whether you could say a little bit more about how once PRISM is fully operational for OTR, and once, now that we've got the full staff complement, any potential timescales on future training of future staff. I wonder whether you could just pin those together roughly and say that on the different scenario plans, given that we don't know what the applications will be, what is the best case and the worst case scenario for clearing our backlog? Because clearly it's substantial at the moment, good reasons for that. But it would be just really helpful for us to be able to see what are the strategic risks with best and worst cases for clearing that backlog. Sorry.
Once we've got the case management system in place and once we've got the RETA tools, we'll then be able to look at the time it takes per application. We know that we've got staff trained now and we've got fluidity between the register team members to come into OTR, so we know that we can have the extra capacity there. Once we know that time scale for each application, we can then build that in, taking account of holidays and maybe staff turnover. But we also restructured the team so that hopefully that brings a better stability because there's more senior officer levels that can check data. So once we've got these in place, we were anticipating, when we looked at it originally, about a 30% time saving on an application. So in the autumn, towards probably November, we'll have a much clearer idea of how quickly we can get through the applications because, as you can appreciate, the donor information manager has spent a lot of time over the last 6 to 8 months actually developing, working with BCC, looking at the applications of the new case management service that she's needed, which has taken her away from actually those final check-in stages. So when we can purely focus, as I said, 90 in 1 month when they're all focused, we'll hopefully, we can see vast improvements when it's in place. But yeah, I'd say November we'll have more idea.
Thank you.
I just wanted really just to make an observation, which was at the staff event on Monday, we had a presentation from the Donor Conception Network to their people, and it was really helpful and informative. And they gave a lot of information about, how the different cohorts of donor-conceived people, how they felt about whether they were interested in, generally as a group, so the younger ones and the older ones and so on, they were interested or showed any interest in finding out about their donors and how the different groups were feeling and so on. So, I think there is, and we're liaising with them, and I think this sort of information is going to be really helpful, anecdotally, to help us make some decisions about how many applications we have and so on. It was very interesting. They've got quite a lot of statistics on this, and it was, I think, very helpful. Okay, so we're sort of racing ahead to any other business. I just wanted really to say a couple of things very briefly. Firstly, as we discussed at the last meeting, we're due to have an away day sometime in the autumn because we agreed that we would do this twice a year. September's looking problematic, mainly because people's diaries are all over the place. And so probably what we're trying to do at the moment is find a date in November, a couple of days in November. We'll do it exactly as we did last time, hopefully, which will be afternoon, evening, and then the following day. And I'll try and make sure we get a date in your diaries this side of the summer, because then you'll know. But I think it will be a really, by November also, we'll have a lot more information both about legislative reform and OTR. So I think that would be really helpful. The other thing is we are just at the minute considering about our PR event, which we reinstated after COVID, face-to-face PR event last year, earlier this year. I can't remember exactly what it was, and it was really very successful, and we're thinking about doing it again, but likely to be in the first quarter of next year. when there's probably, we're again have a lot more to discuss. We'll have a lot more certainty about some of the issues we're sort of currently discussing. So we will intend to do this, and we'll come and discuss it at the next authority about when it might be. Apart from that, before I turn to Peter, let's just I'm looking around the table if anybody has, okay. So Peter, why don't you want to say a few words?
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I couldn't let this pass without putting on record my thanks, and I think your collective thanks, to Debbie, who has been a stalwart of the governance team for a number of years now. And if you take part, whether it's an authority or a committee, is likely to have been, the minutes have been taken by Debbie to a very high standard. I'm delighted that Debbie's, what the hell, no I'm not. I was going to say I'm delighted that Debbie's got a new job, and of course I am, but we will miss you enormously. You've been an absolutely key part of the team. But I'm also delighted to say that Ali Margrave is our new replacement for Debbie. She comes with a very strong background in exactly the sort of skills we want. You'll meet her soon, and I'm sure she can continue the very good work in terms of making sure that all of our business is transacted and recorded accurately. And as a good civil servant, I doff my metaphorical hat to you, Debbie. Thank you very much indeed.
And I just want to echo that too. When we heard you were going to greater heights, I thought, what on earth are we going to do? But we're looking forward to welcoming Ali. So just before we close, I'm conscious this has been a short and sweet meeting. We've cracked on through a whole lot of things, which has been great. But the meat of the July authority member, the real meat of it, is our discussion on Monday on legislative reform. So I really hope that everybody can attend. It's a very important meeting with some very important decisions to be taken. So look forward to seeing you all virtually on Monday. Thanks very much. Bye.